The Unbearable Lightness of Being, 1988 film starring Daniel Day-Lewis, Juliette Binoche, and Lena Olin. It was based on a novel by Milan Kundera, and if I had to describe the film somehow, I'd say it's an erotic drama about commitment and relationships cast on the background of social turmoil of the Prague Spring of 1968. The story focuses on three characters. Daniel Day-Lewis plays Tomasz, a young, dashing doctor in Prague that leads a pretty active sexual life, sleeping around with various women, but always especially circling around one of them, Sabina, played by Lena Olin. They seem to understand each other best, as she's also this free-spirited artist. One day, while away for business, Tomasz meets a shy country girl named Teresa. She then comes to visit him in Prague. They have sex, but then she ends up staying with him, and then they begin a relationship of sorts. A relationship that she is certain is monogamous and kind of hopeful that it remains so, whilst Tomasz continues to go behind her back to cheat on her with Sabina and other women. And between the three of them, the central drama begins to play out. So I want to circle back first to the novel that the movie is based on. I have not read it, but apparently Milan Kundera was pretty unhappy with the adaptation. He said it's too different from the book, to the point that upon seeing it, he decided he would never let anyone else adapt any of his work again. That's kind of interesting to me because it brings up that point of the never-ending debate whether adaptations of existing work should be judged as adaptations or as their own thing. I believe it's kind of in the middle. It's a bit of both. But if it is in fact an adaptation and not just minor inspiration that you're taking from a book or whatever other pre-existing material, I do think you owe some debt to it, and you should remain faithful within reason, of course. In any case, this film I can only speak about as its own thing. I haven't read the novel, as I said, and as such, it didn't quite work for me. I will begin with the things that did work. I think the performances are the key strength of the film. All three of the main cast are brilliant, just disappearing into the characters. I particularly enjoyed Lena Olin as Sabina. She is just completely magnetic on her own and has great chemistry with Day-Lewis. I didn't quite like Teresa as a character, but in terms of acting it out, I think Binoche is great as well. And of course, Day-Lewis himself is completely just flawless as always. I've read that he even learned to speak Czech for the film, even though it was filmed in English, because hey, why not? And the second thing that I liked, apart from the performances, was this central concept of studying various people's approach to relationships, commitment, and monogamy. Between the main three, I think that the topic is explored very heavily, and it is something thought-provoking for sure. Now, there is another side to that coin that is this film. First problem for me is its length. It runs for almost 3 hours, and I do believe that's too long, because the movie is rather slow and uneventful, and it tends to meander, especially in the middle part. There are prolonged periods where nothing really happens in the story, and characters just have sex with each other in those long scenes. On the one hand, yes, there was an artistic reason for featuring the erotic elements so much, definitely. On the other, at some point it does feel a little gratuitous and overdrawn. I also think that if you have a movie of this length and you have characters that at the end of the day don't really fundamentally change, because that's what happens here, there really isn't a noticeable character journey for any of them. They mostly stay the same over the course of the film. Then it does get kind of boring because the dynamics also stay the same. So there's nothing really new introduced over the course of the story. And then I also think that the historic background of Prague Spring was a bit wasted. For a while in the film, it seems like it will have a lot of bearing on the plot and heavy consequences for the characters, but it ends up being a B plot at best and doesn't bring nearly as much gravity as it could have. So as a result, this interesting setting in terms of time period ends up being used pretty sparsely, and I think you could mostly move the story to any other period and have it be almost the same, which is a bit disappointing. So to kind of bring all of this back together, I think there are very good elements in The Unbearable Lightness of Being, but ultimately the film as a whole is dragged down by the weight of its own runtime and sluggish pacing, and as a result, it ends up being just so-so.